สวัสดีครับ Good morning once again. I think it's my pleasure to be invited to be part of the exceptional program today. Welcome once again for the BDFC 2023. And this is the very first panel discussion for this event, which will be talking about the digital infrastructure innovation ecosystem, which will be the success of the financial innovations in the future. So I think everyone agrees that in order to achieve the financial inclusion or enhancing the efficiencies, we do need the digital infrastructure to be very successful. Just as the Mr. Governor mentioned at the very first opening speech, three things that Bank of Thailand focused, which are the common utilities, the open digital payment, and also the collaborative approaches. We do need the digital infrastructure to be very successful. So this job is not a one-man job. So we need a lot of stakeholders in order to achieve this one. Certainly, we do have three key stakeholders today to be part of the discussion today. We have the regulators who shape the landscape. We have the players who utilize the innovations to drive the new ideas, the new use cases, and also the developers in order to design and develop new things to be very successful. Today, we are very honored to have the three key speakers. The first one from the regulators, please welcome คุณรณดลนะครับนำดลนา the Deputy Governor of Bank of Thailand. Please welcome ครับ The next one we have the representative from developers, Mr. Ritesh Shukla, the CEO, the National Payment Corporations of India or NPCI. Welcome ครับ And lastly, representative from the players. Our final speaker is Mr. Sam Ellington, the CEO of the Engine Starling. Please welcome. Yeah. Okay. Good morning, everyone. Yeah, as we know that for the first round, we will be talking about the overview and foundations of digital infrastructure. So then maybe I'd like to start with Ritesh because you've done a lot of jobs successfully in India in order to implement the digital infrastructure to enhance the quality of living and financial inclusion in India. So maybe if you may please give us or share us some insights about what does it take for India to develop the foundational digital infrastructure and what were the motivation back then? Why did you do that? And why have you done a lot of great work? And also what changed the life to India populations, please?
Thank you, Ton, for the question and thank you for giving me the opportunity to be here. I'm really excited to talk about the evolution that has taken place in India. So if you look at the slides on the screen, I think the digital public infrastructure that we have created in India has actually three layers. If you see, the first layer being the foundational layer is digital identity, and which is we have a program called Aadhaar, which in Sanskrit means foundation. The second layer is the payments layer, which is what my organization NPCI runs. It's called Unified Payment Interface. We'll talk about it in coming slides. And the third is more about the data exchange. So we have created platforms that allows people exchange data, be it a seller or a buyer, be it somebody who is sharing information, the other person is consuming information. There are many platforms that are being created, but two such are, one is Open Network for Digital Commerce and the other is DigiLocker. Open Network for Digital Commerce is essentially a platform that allows small businesses, small sellers, small operators to come online and compete with the organized big e-tailers. And it is gaining a lot of traction, and it actually allows small mom and pop corner stores to come online and be able to sell to the entire country or the entire population. Now, moving on, some of the things that really stand out for us as a country today. If you see, we are a big country, 1.4 billion people. And, today for us, 80% of the population, which is literally everyone who is of a banking age, has access to banking services. So everyone has bank account. Then we have the Aadhaar program. Now, there are 1.3 billion people who are part of this program. And Aadhaar essentially means that every Indian has a unique 12-digit ID number. And behind those 12-digit IDs reside the biometrics of the person. So now imagine a situation that you use that Aadhaar to authenticate yourself anywhere in the country. So today I'm living in Mumbai, but tomorrow if I move to Bangalore, I can still use the same thing and authenticate myself. It reduces the KYC burden. It makes things much more efficient and faster. And I can use it to authenticate myself anywhere, get access to banking services and other services. So everybody has a bank account. Every adult has a bank account. Everyone has a digital ID or way to authenticate themselves. And then the third important aspect which often goes unnoticed is the mobile revolution that's happening. We are today the largest liberalized internet ecosystem. We have one of the cheapest data in the world when it comes to, we have like 1 GB of data in India is about 17 US cents. And there are 1.2 billion cell phone users. And now imagine a combination of these three. Everybody adult has a bank account. There is a way you can authenticate yourself and you have access to internet. A power of these three things is driving the direction that India is going in. And top it up with a young country. We have median age of 28 years. We have the third largest thriving fintech ecosystem. In 2014, 2015, we had 1,000 fintechs in India. But as of today, we have more than 100,000 fintechs in India. And these are fintechs who are creating jobs. They are creating better solutions. They are helping money move faster. They're helping small businesses. They're helping rural economy. So there's a lot of good stuff that is being derived using the combination of digital public infrastructure. And of course, these are run by autonomous entities powered by strong legislation and regulations from Reserve Bank of India with complete independence, and they are very, very committed to their objective and with a not-for-profit motive. Now coming up, talking about my organization, NPCI is a not-for-profit organization. We are owned by 65 shareholders, and the objective is to transform the retail payment needs in India. And I think we have done a great job in terms of doing that. We are operator of UPI. UPI today is, if you see, the largest instant payment platform in the world. Last month we processed 10.6 billion transactions on UPI, and 58% of these transactions were merchant payments. So you can very well imagine the value UPI has created. People, I don't know when was the last time I went to an ATM in India. I don't need to, because anything and everything I can pay using UPI. And we work very beautifully with different players. We have a very, very strong collaboration model that truly is democratizing payments. Big players include likes of, Google Pay, Phone Pay, which is a Walmart-owned entity, Amazon Pay, WhatsApp, our own Bheem. And the model is such that it enables open banking. I can download any app of my choice and connect it to any bank account. And yes, I can do P2P as well as P2M payments. We are also going cross-border. I think by end of this year or early next year, we'll also be able to connect with PromptPay in Thailand. So any tourist coming from India will be able to scan the QR code here and make payment, and vice versa. Any Thai tourist coming to India will be able to scan QR codes in UPI and make payments. So I think these are some of the use cases that we serve, and we are also CBDC ready, if that's an exciting topic here. So UPI as a platform is CBDC ready. You can use CBDC as a funding source. I think some of the very, very strong use cases, and of course, we have not left anyone out, because we are all about democratizing payments. So we have solutions that work on feature phones as well, because some of the people, probably the elder people, don't want to use smartphone. They think it's not safe. So there is a functionality for them as well. We are doing biometric payments. Last week we had a global fintech festival, in that we announced many first. One such was credit on UPI. So imagine a small business or a merchant now can apply for credit lending and also take that and start using it for their business needs. So these are some of the things that we have done, and I think the whole world is talking about it, and my organization that I represent, has also been identified as top 100 most influential companies for 2023 by Times Magazine. So there's a lot of good stuff that we have done. I hope I answered your question within the time frame that you had given to me.
Sure. That's very impressive. Thank you very much. So not only the enhance the financial inclusion in India, you still create thousands of jobs in it as well. So then that change the landscape of India. And also, from what I heard, probably in the coming months or year, there will be like PromptPay connections and CBDC between Thailand and India as well.
No, I talked about PromptPay and UPI, not CBDC, just to clarify.
All right. Okay. Thank you.
Don't want to get into any trouble.
Okay, so then I moved to ท่านรองรณดล a little bit about the Bank of Thailand. So, considering that the ongoing advancements in Thailand financial payment infrastructures, could you please elaborate a little bit on how these infrastructures contribute in the augmentations of the financial inclusivity in Thailand, please?
ครับสวัสดีครับ Thank you คุณต้น Good morning everyone. Thank you Flotich and Sam for joining this panel. I don't know whether I got to repeat what the governor mentioned, but the thing that the Bank of Thailand is embarking is on the new digital financial landscape, on the open data, open infrastructure, and open competition. But as Flotich mentioned, we're not going to compare note between India and Thailand. But you see that the important thing of having digital, financial system is having a good foundation infrastructure, as India having Aadhaar and ID, digital ID, and in terms of API and UPI, for example. For Thailand, the case is also the same. We have to emphasize on very good foundation infrastructure. We have prompt pay, we have the standard QR code, and we also have NDID, which is National Digital ID, which is a good foundation for going forward for the digital payment systems. And the past 7 years, we have to admit that this foundation is helping us in terms of consumers, in terms of retails, in terms of business segment to be able to transfer money with the digital, with a reasonable cost and transfer, especially under COVID-19 pandemics. This is helping the activities that when we have a closed systems, we were able to using that digital transactions. This is the number that I think we have been seeing in the past 7 years and think have been really promising. We have seen about 1.8 million people register on the NDID the national digital already, and we have seen both in the consumer and business segment has been a significant growth on mobile payment banking. The growth rate has been unbelievable, about 47.2% on average for the past 5 years. And the transaction, believe it or not, is almost 52 million per day. So this is coming from a journey of 7 years. And we have seen about 130 billion baht account for on daily basis. We have about 9 million acceptable points at the point of sales on the QR code. And the past 4 years, we have seen, myself, maybe spend about 89 times per day using the QR code. But today you can see about 425 times per person per year. This is something on the retail sites. But as Governor mentioned, on the business side, we're about to launch what we call Plum Bees, which is something for business digital footprint. We hope that using this Plum Bees for the business sites, there could be a digital footprint, and eventually with this digital footprint for business segment, they can be able to use other services in the financial inclusion. But this is a story of maybe we go to it's made look good in terms of numbers. But as Governor mentioned, there's still a lot to be done. I think we have seen two things that I think in what next that we want to see, probably on ecosystems. First, probably on the consumer empowerment. A second one is probably on open digital payment ecosystems. On the first one, on the customer empower ecosystem, what we would like to see is that as we like to see in open data, we like to see the consumer, which is their data belong to, have consent to be able to transfer their information from one service provider to another with a reasonable cost. So this is something that we like to see in terms of having a digital footprint, in terms of having control their own data. But what we got to do initially, probably got to be using what current regulatory framework that we're having. So first initial, probably we'll be sharing information within the financial systems sector, whether in banks or non-banks, and with a readable format, with the API standards that need to be done. So this first is a sharing information among financial service provider that we are regulated. But at this moment, we also talking to other non-financial sector, for example, on utility, on telecom companies, and even on the public utility like revenue department, whether we can be able to use a data consent from consumer to be able to share those information among bank, non-bank, for example. So this is kind of second phase on journey for consumer empowerment ecosystem. But this is to increase opportunity for consumer, for segment to be able to use the information for digital services, for other service inclusion. So this is a journey for consumer empowerment. But more important is probably on the open digital payment ecosystems. What we have learned that we would like to see and allow types of player to access and innovate the financial systems. And also we're also able to serve need for people. So how to do that? So we have to have a 3 jigsaws, I guess, that we like to see in the open digital payment ecosystem. First one is probably on the open digital payment infrastructure. You're probably aware that the digital infrastructure are a foundation for financial services. So we need to ensure the reliability and openness for the systems. So the Bank of Thailand like to see what we want to see is we see all type of service provider to be able to enter into this ecosystem of infrastructure systems. So what we got to do revise at this moment is our regulatory framework to enhance governance and strengthen the risk management of what we call systematic important retail payment systems. So with this framework, we hoped that all qualified players, whether it's banked or non-banked, will be able to access the infrastructure with a reasonable cost and get involved in setting the direction for developing the infrastructure. So it means that the system will be able to having player, not only banks, but non-bank and qualifiers to be involved in the infrastructure. That's the first thing, is to having open key digital payment infrastructure. Second one is probably on integrated the strategy plan for cash and digital, because when we doing the direction paper, we probably having a strategy for cash payment, how to make it less cash, but we also have another strategy of how to adopt it digital. But we said these things all go together, so we want to align the direction of how to get less cash society in Thailand. So we have learned from the survey, from customer experiences, that in the urban rural area, there are some segment, some room for improvement, for example. The people who still cannot access to the digital payment. Even in the rural areas, in the city like Bangkok, there's still some people still prefer to use cash in small ticket items. For example, 20 baht tips or for a farmer or whatever it is. So we try to find out how we can use digital for the small ticket item. So this thing is going to be our ecosystem of how to align the direction of digital payment and the cash. So that's going to be something that we work on. But most, and probably more importantly, to put all jigsaw together, is probably on the supporting the payment pricing schemes. I think that's probably the most incentive of how people can use digital payment with a reasonable cost. So we have to work out on the pricing scheme for payments in terms of digital, and then together with revising the way of cash and check, for example. So this is going to be inclusive of overall picture of the pricing structure. And we're working together with the industry to hopefully to get the fee structure to be concluded by second quarter next year, and probably will be gradually implemented by later next year. So this is the framework of what we hoping for in terms of making more digital finance, of having consumer empowerment, and in terms of open digital infrastructure.
Thank you, Kap. I think that's very insightful, which I'm part of one of the Thai people and a big fan of the system that's been developed for the past few years, especially after the COVID. We can see that the retail implementations of all the QR code payment, prompt pay, and so on, I think has been done so well. And from Deputy Governor Rongradon said, we will be seeing another prompt pay for the business, and also the data sharing under consent base, which will be enhancing the practicalities and also the implementation of a lot of use cases throughout the businesses. I think that's very interesting, and a lot of the framework will be drafting right now. The next, I think, to Sam, as one of the challenger bank in UK, I think what we really want to hear as well, how do you see and utilize the current state of digital infrastructure that can help accelerating the digitalization in UK, and also how to support innovation in the financial sector in UK, please?
Yeah, thank you, and thank you for having me here today. It's been really interesting so far. I'm from Starling Bank. For those who don't know, Starling's a digital-only bank in the UK, one of the few that's really hit scale and critically profitability in the world. A lot of fintechs around the world are not making money, and Starling made £195 million last year on turnover of 450. So you can make money. Money's a digital bank, but we've obviously been a big beneficiary of the kind of open infrastructure and the digital infrastructure that exists in the UK. We wouldn't have been able to grow and become part of the system in the way we have without it. So in some ways, actually sitting here today, I'm realizing how far behind the UK is. We've been looking at our payment infrastructure for 10 years and can't make a decision, and UPI's been built and hit remarkable scale that way. And here in Thailand, you have a national digital ID scheme, which would be the most wonderful thing. Verifying someone digitally in Britain is extremely difficult. But I'll talk through some of our journey and what's worked well for Starling and enabled it to provide a real competitor to the banks and to raise the bar for the whole industry. You're never going to have a dominant bank. Regulators won't allow it, that you would in other industries. But a lot of what the challenger banks and the fintechs have done in Britain is really raise the standards of the traditional banks as well. It's forced them to up their game and to replicate the features and the benefits for consumers that challenger banks have brought. So, I mean, the digital infrastructure around is key, but actually a lot of what the traditional banks need to deal with in Britain is the digital infrastructure at home. You can't make the most of these real-time systems, this interconnected world, the API-enabled open economies, if you're running on very, very dated, very legacy core systems that can't operate in that way. And so the foundation, actually, of this digital infrastructure is sorting out your core systems, and that's where Starling's been very fortunate. We're digitally native, born in the cloud, and so this world worked very nicely for us. And it's a real cultural shift too. Banks traditionally move at quite a slow cadence. Ultimately, my world before was kind of quarterly release cycles, change control boards, that kind of thing. That and management by business case, as I would look at it, really stifles the ability to innovate within a bank as well. And so some of this innovation will come from new fintechs from the world outside, but a lot of the innovations and consumer improvements you're hoping to see will come from within the banks themselves. And so they need a cultural shift that enables innovation, empowers people, lets things change, lets experiments run, lets experiments fail as well. And doing that will let you make the most of the ecosystem around. So open banking is often touted as one of the things that was going to transform finances in Britain. Actually, that bit didn't really work out. Partly for regulatory reasons and because of those core systems at other banks. In the end, the scope of data that was going to be shared and the level of portability is so constrained that actually it's very hard in the UK to make effective decisions on it. You can't see people's savings or investments or anything to do with wealth. And even the current account data is so restricted. So other countries have taken that much further. Australia and the way Thailand's going with its regulations, I think we'll be able to make much better use of. And so open banking in the UK has more worked on the retail side and on payments than anything, on SME and on payments than anything else. Businesses spend a lot more time on financial admin and connecting your bank account with accounting packages, invoicing packages, kind of automating accounts payable and accounts receivable is starting to have an impact. But for retail competition, retail portability, it wasn't something that was key. But things that did really work for us are things like open access to payments. UK real-time payment infrastructure has been around for a long time, but it's basically been a closed shop. Until fairly recently, you had to have a banking license to connect with it directly, and even then, it was very hard to join. Starling was only the second bank to join in the 20 years the scheme has been running since the founder members, which shows what the barrier is. But in the last few years, the regulations have shifted. Sorry. And so now you can settle as a non-bank participant, and something like 30, 40 connected participants have joined in the last few years. So if you change the rule set slightly, it really opens up access and enables it through. And then in other areas, there's kind of data sharing organizations that are, to an extent, mandated and cost effective, which have been really, really useful. So we have very good credit bureaus in the UK. Kind of account data, borrowing data, payment history data is very well shared and contributed to by all the banks and made accessible to new participants readily. And so you can enter the lending market without a huge history and a huge customer base to deal with directly. And financial crime is a massive problem in any country that moves more and more towards real-time payments will realise how much of a problem it's going to be. We've got very good at strongly authenticating the customer, sending the transactions, so the fraudsters have adapted. And in Britain now, by far the biggest source of financial crime is authorised push payments, where the legitimate account holder is tricked into making a payment on false pretences, be it a phone call or pretending to be the bank or be the government, or just false purchases online, things that don't exist on marketplaces, fake investment scams, that kind of thing. Last year, Britain lost £500 million to authorised push payment fraud like that, where legitimate people deliberately sent their own money to criminals. And that's very much enabled by it. And so this is where the digital ecosystems need to improve. Digital ID would really help. We don't have it. So to make up for that, the industry is building a series of databases and things to share financial crime data between the participants, so that because it always targets the newer players. And so when you join, you need a way to share that knowledge and the history of bad actors effectively across the industry to prevent the new players becoming a real hotbed of financial crime there. So there's a lot you could do probably beyond digital ID, and the other participant to look at are actually government databases. The British government's not very good at opening data, but it's a really good source of ID, driving licenses, passports. You can access those in other countries. And then if you really want to impact businesses and SME lending, things like tax authority records in the Middle East now, there's initiatives happening to link bank data with small business tax records, which are a really good idea of financial performance of businesses, and that kind of thing would let new participants much more effectively lend to smaller businesses. As you digitalise away from cash to other forms of payments, business records become electronic, then tax filings become electronic, and all of that can underpin a much more successful lending economy.
Right, thank you. That's very insightful as well. And I think from what I heard is like infrastructure is there. Actually, the technology is not just the only barriers that need to overcome, but actually we need to have the cultural shift as well in order to open for the new idea, new innovation, and of course to accept the new way of working, new way of how people live in everyday basis. And I think you touched a little bit about it. Our next topic of discussion about the challenges and the issues that we had or we have so far while we're trying to implement this digital infrastructure. Maybe I move to the Bank of Thailand. ท่านรองนรดล a little bit about what you see as the challenges and lessons learned in the promoting the adoption in digital financial services, and how we overcome on these challenges, please.
Thank you, Khun Ton. Yes, what Khun Sam mentioned on the digital fraud is probably one of the common themes of challenges, not only Thailand, but in the UK and India and around the world. But go back to three challenges I think is for the context of Thailand. And I think despite we are probably ranked third in the mobile banking in the world, globally, but I could put the three challenges behind that what I mentioned in my first question is how to adopt it, or those open banking, or in terms of how to make the ecosystem in terms of digital banking. But that thing that need to be done in terms of cooperation, in terms of alignment of the interest party to get things, relevant stakeholder to get things done. I think, for example, for digital payment adoption for business sector, okay, we have a better services, we have thing to offer in the products, but how to get their perceptions right in terms of behavior, in terms of the cost benefit, in terms of how to convey them that accepting the digital payment is a way of doing business. Something is quite challenging in terms of getting their need and then to know how to invest and their operation. Because if they go to the digital world of payment, in terms of internal operation, in terms of all the things operating, it is need to be, in the good ecosystem first. So perception, behavior is quite important. And then for service provider himself, they also need to see the benefit of opening up their ecosystem as well. Because once they open their networks, they can get expansion to more ecosystem. So I think they're open-minded, not only from the business sector, but service provider also need to open-minded how to get their network to be greater expanded to an ecosystem. But okay, that's perception. So the roles of regulators, roles of government players, and probably get a key role to get involved to how to get this, alignment, incentive in the same, journey in terms of getting the digital adoption on the financial services is probably one of the challenges that we need to get it tackled. And the second challenge is probably on digital divide. As I mentioned, there's still room for improvement, room for getting people to adopt a digital payment, not all the rural people, but also the urban people. How we can get this extensive more use of digital usage among people is something not only on education. We at the Bank Thailand promoting the digital literacy awareness. For example, we just had in July in terms of communication hackathon for financial fraud and digital finance. We also launching foster the PROMBs for business sector. We also having promoting more digital payment services access point in remote area. But there's still thing to be done. For example, the tools and the things that get more convenient for people to use a digital service provider. As example, small items. If I go to the small restaurants or street foods, how it could be easier for me to use digital mobile banking rather than 20 baht cash, for example. So in terms of digital divide is something another challenges. But not last but not the least, is probably on as Sam mentioned, on the fraud and scams that it happened around the world, and in Thailand especially, it happened. Once digital comes, the fraud comes as well. So what we tackle this is going work hand in hand with the government agencies as well as with the stakeholder on financial sectors on how to prevent, how to detect, and how to respond. On preventive measure, we financial institution did you agree on improving the fraud surveillance system on the mobile banking and no longer send SMS and email. So if you nowadays if you see the link from the banks to SMS to whatever it is, it's not from the bank because now banks and non-bank, they do agree on no more of link in SMS and email, for example. And also on biometric authentication is also required if we put the transaction of more than 50,000 baht per day. So this is something is helpful in terms of preventive. But if it happened, we've got to have a detective measure in terms of we have to reporting financial institution, reporting substitute transaction to AMLO, and they're going to have the real-time fraud surveillance detection system by the end of this year. And last month, actually, the Thai Banking Association just launched what we call the Central Fraud Registry. This is going to be very exchange in a timely manner in terms of the fraud. So this is going to be helpful in terms of response to detective. But in terms of response measure, the bank now provides 24 hours hotline and information exchange channel among stakeholders and among consumers. So hopefully with this got to establish what we call National Anti-Scheme Center in the process. So with this, three challenges that I lay out, hopefully that the adoption of digital payment will be something we're looking to be more progressive, especially on people who still are digital divide and people who still like to say more adoption on the digital services.
Thank you very much, Kap. I think it pretty much like what Sam mentioned on the previous sessions about how we can change the behavior of not only the users, just to accept the digital money or digital payment rather than accept the cash, either to achieve the cashless society, and also how we can incentivize the providers to develop the system to be more on the digital infrastructure. And I think next session would be to Ritesh. I think there must be a lot of insight sharing because you have done a great job and also you must learn a lot of things as well. Can you please share us the same thing about the challenges and lessons learned and how you overcome that one, please?
Thank you. I think I'll not use the word challenges, but I'll rather use areas to focus. And I think the first thing that comes to mind when you create something of that magnitude is consumer confidence. How do you get people to be early adapters of anything that you create, and once people have tested it, how do you build scale? Because if you create something and nobody is using it, so there's no point. So inspiring consumers to be confident and creating early adoption and scale. The second important area to focus would be to drive collaboration. How do you drive collaboration within the ecosystem? Ecosystem has various players, fintechs, banks, other service providers, merchant community, business. So how do you get everybody on the same table? How do you, align with them and achieve the objective that you have? So collaboration to have, inclusion, collaboration to drive democratization. And I think the third and probably the most important thing is rules and regulations, and that's where we work very closely with our Central Bank, Reserve Bank of India. They're very progressive. So how do you create, rules and regulations, or probably a framework for better governance, for better enablement of innovation, so that people are able to come up with new ideas and they are tested and piloted, and of course how do you ensure consumer interest protection? So the first being confidence, collaboration, and rules and regulations, and finally the technology not being the least, but technology to create better user experiences, technology to unlock new use cases, and also technology to ensure there is safety and security in whatever you create. So I think these are the four areas that one has to focus, and we believe that if you do these four, then you have a program that will help you drive financial inclusion, that will help you displace cash. It will be sovereign. You will not be dependent on any foreign entity or power. This solution is in your country, in your control. Enable open banking, fintech incubation, multiplier of economic activity, cross-border interoperability we talked about, and also enabler of national agenda. So these are things that you can derive if you do, some of the things that I mentioned well. And I just wanted to spend a bit of more time on the multiplier of economic activity. I'll just give you an example, in developing countries, it's so difficult to get business loan for any unorganized merchant. I've heard stories that sometimes the monthly interest rate can go as high as 15 to 20%. Now here, using UPI, there are fintechs, so there are banks who are now looking at receivable data of a merchant by looking at UPI transactions. And the same merchant, same business is now getting probably a loan at a 2 to 3% a month from being 15 to 20. And now imagine the value it creates in the system. You can, increase your economic activity. You can open more stores. You can hire more people. So I think those are some of the values that you unlock by doing things right. So I hope that was useful, and this is just how UPI has penetrated in the fabric of the country in the area of digital payments. So thank you.
Thank you. I think that's one of the more challenges, starting to do the thing right from the beginning. So how can we know that what is right or wrong? And you make a very great summaries on the area to focus, the confidence of the users and provider, the collaborations of everyone. How can we align with the incentive of all the providers and everyone in the ecosystems. Rule and regulations must be supportive and help driving the all stakeholders to do the new things and also the technologies. And actually, we discussed a little bit this morning about the fraud because that's what Than Rong Radadon mentioned about the fraud challenges in Thailand when we adopt the digital infrastructure. Maybe Ritesh, can you share a little bit about the fraud case in India? How is there any frauds as well? How do you handle it?
So, though I'm not an expert in this topic, but I'll tell you that, we use a lot of technology, artificial intelligence and all to spot early trends. and we collaborate intensively with the players, banks, fintechs, and we invest a lot into consumer awareness campaigns. So, for example, if you're seeing one particular kind of fraud that is taking place in market, then I think we go on an overdrive, of course, under the guidance of our regulator, Reserve Bank of India, in terms of creating awareness about what to do and what not to do, and it kind of works. We've done a lot in that area. Then we also, like I said, use the trends that we see and use technology to ensure that you are able to prevent those frauds. So awareness, consumer awareness, being able to prevent those frauds, and also collaborating with different players in the ecosystem to go and nip the bud.
You mentioned a bit this morning regarding financial literacy, awareness of consumers in India. How you go about it?
So, sir, ours is a big country, over 30, different territories and region, and often people in different states speak different language. So we, and sometime about last year around this time, or probably end of the year, we did a massive, print and digital media and TV campaign wherein the message was relayed in different languages that people speak, and also in a very simple manner. Often we also use celebrities to reinforce our message, and given, we are a not-for-profit organization, a lot of celebrities, do this out of the goodness in their heart, just for free. So it helps, create awareness, and of course, like I said, we are a young country, 28 years is median age, so youngsters are, pretty smart to catch on. So I think that also helps, us in that sense.
I see. So this awareness and education is using the right channel and the right, the one who communicate the messages. So maybe I move to Sam. What else? As you are the private sectors, right? If you really want to give some key takeaway or some advice or some, whatever you want to speak to the public sector and the regulators in order to create the environment that's very supportive for enhancing this digital infrastructure.
Yeah, I think you're very fortunate here ultimately, and I agree with a lot of what's been said. Digital adoption, if the cost and convenience are right, consumers and businesses will switch to digital payments, to that kind of channels, and that's good for the economy and good for lending and good for government tax records as well. Scams can be dealt with, the systems and artificial intelligence will get there, and education's a big part of it as well. There's a similar body in the UK that spends a lot of money on education and TV campaigns and that kind of thing to teach people about scams. So having sat listening to your governor this morning, I think the regulator has a lot of the right ideas here. The Bank of Thailand knows broadly what it needs to be doing. It has open dialogue with sandboxes and approaches to work through. So probably the two things in the UK that I'd apply that I think have worked quite well. One, how they think about change, which has really shifted in Britain. Change was a risk to be avoided, and the UK regulators quite materially shifted its position now to change is inevitable in many different ways. And actually the banks that do lots of little iterative changes all the time are delivering better outcomes for customers, and that's what the regulators care about. It's one of my favourite FCA papers, because when we were first getting licensed and explaining that we planned to release our core systems 20, 30, 40 times a day, which we still do in quite a large bank now, they were horrified, frankly. Whereas now they've published a paper saying it's a better way to work. So, and that's the thing with innovation, ultimately. The onus is on the industry to demonstrate what it's doing is at least as good as what is done today. And so the UK regulator rarely tells you how to do something. It sets the guardrails, it sets the outcomes that it wants to see. You can do things in a different way, but the onus is on the bank that wants to do something differently to demonstrate why what it wants to do is at least as good as what is there today. And in some places that's quite easy, the bar's quite low. In other areas the standards are very high. And one of the most interesting bits of legislation recently, the UK has effectively formalised this in the last couple of months in a regulation called Consumer Duty. And so when banks are designing and operating financial products now, we are legally mandated to ensure that they deliver good outcomes for customers. Not just fair, which is a low-ish bar, but actually that anything we put in the market and anything we operate is genuinely good for the people accessing those services. And that really makes you think about it differently, makes you price it very differently. And so by regulators changing from setting rules to setting outcomes and expectations, I think that can open up a world of innovation and let companies think differently.
Yeah, to add on to what Sam mentioned on consumer duties or bank duties, but we just launched also as well in terms of what we call responsible as a lenders. So in terms of through the cycles, the banks and financial institutions need to think how starting from getting the new product right for the target consumers, and in terms of following up until the end of consumer. So it's not only, as mentioned, not only responsible as a lender, but also I probably have to emphasize also responsible as a borrower as well in terms of disciplinary and financial literacy as well. So both sides need to be balancing on those.
Yeah, in general, I think you're very well placed. I mean, quite an unusual and fortunate position that I work for Starling in the UK, but we supply the banking technology that runs Starling to banks in a number of other markets. So I meet all kinds of regulators in all kinds of regulatory environments. And from what I've heard today, you're very well placed for an exciting future.
That's what I mentioned. This morning we discussed about the regulator on the liability sides on financial in the UK. What is that all about in terms of the fraud and can you?
Yeah, as part of this, real-time payments led to a lot of fraud. Consumers are quite well protected on cards, debit cards and credit cards. There's chargebacks. You'll generally get your money back. If you send a bank transfer to buy something on a marketplace on Facebook or that kind of thing, and the thing doesn't arrive, you've got no protection at all today. And so that trend from cards to bank transfers is arguably worse for consumers. The regulators in the UK are very concerned about this. The liability positions shifted over time, but ultimately at some point next year, the liability is going to shift entirely to the banks. And so if it doesn't exist, we will have to pay out in investment scams, in impersonation scams, in purchase scams. That's daunting for the banking industry, but the idea behind it is the banks are ultimately the only ones who can do something about this as well. If they connect their ecosystems better, if they shared data better, they probably could do more to prevent scams. And ultimately, you need a stick behind this, and there's no worse stick than paying out the £500 million a year that was lost last year. That's quite a good incentive to invest.
Right, and I think time is running out. I think we can discuss about this all day long. But if we really want to have like one last big sentence as the key success factor or the things that we think this is more important, can you please just give one big sentence? Maybe I start with Ritesh, please.
I think, and this is coming from the way we, from our DNA, if I can say, is that what we do is going to change the lives of people who are today struggling to make the ends meet. So the goodness or the good objective behind it is the driver of the force in anything that you do. You think of the people who you are going to make it easy for and just go with it. It'll happen. The universe will help you be successful.
Thank you.
Yeah, probably similar to what Governor mentioned this morning. I mean, to drive an ecosystem for innovations for digital system, probably it's not a one-man job. It needs to be collaborations among stakeholders, and more importantly, to see the needs and from consumer, from a business segment sides, what are their really needs and what are the change that they need require for them. So I think changing mindset and having a forward-looking mindset is probably the key for getting adoption of what we call for the Bank of Thailand in terms of open data, open infrastructure, and open competition.
Thank you. And lastly,
I would say innovative technology is rarely the challenge. There's lots of it around. It's that adoption, and the adoption is driven by solving customer problems. So I think at the heart of all of this, we need to be thinking, what are we doing to make lives better for customers and for small businesses? And if we do that, the rest of the ecosystem will fall into place.
Thank you so much. So then, actually, this is not one-man job, just as Governor and Deputy Governor mentioned, and this is everyone's responsibility in order to thrive to the new era of digital finance and digital infrastructure. And so, thank you very much for today. Please give the big hands to the speakers. Thank you very much.